It has come down to this. An emergency request to the U.S. Supreme Court for a stay of execution in the case of Theodore Bundy has been rejected this evening. The vote was 5-4.
There isn't anybody who grew up here that is of a certain age that doesn't have a Ted Bundy story. His presence here is huge.
It's such an amazing story that touches on so many things.
It is part of the history of the Pacific Northwest. It's part of the history of criminal justice in the United States. It's a story worth telling.
You're up for election, aren't you?
Mr. Bundy
got it, didn't you?
Mr. Bundy?
You told me that you were going to get me. He said he was going to get me. Okay, you've got the indictment. It's all you're going to get. Let's read it. Let's go.
Theodore Robert Bundy, you are charged, indictment, 2 counts burglary, 2 counts murder in the first degree, 3 counts attempted murder in the first degree. Design or intent to effect the death of said Lisa Levy.
My chance to talk to the press.
Contrary to section 78204 Florida statute.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
And your grand jury is being...
Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to my channel. How are you all doing tonight? I know, it's been a while, hasn't it? Well, it's been a while since I sat down and actually recorded a video. I have an explanation for that, and that is because of the video that you are watching right now. It has been so long in the making. I took an entire class dedicated just to psychopaths and sociopaths and chose to do my topic on this particular subject. And I wanted to wait until that class was kind of over with, so that way I could get more insight and get more information on him as much as I can. I have wanted to do a video on Ted Bundy for so long, and I'm finally getting to do it. And I hope I can do it justice. So where was I? The sound got me distracted. Oh yeah, so I hope I can do this video justice. But first I want to ask how y'all are. How have y'all been? Have any exciting life events happened for y'all? Any new jobs? Any new career changes? Leave them down in the comments below. Let me know what kind of things have been going on in your life, because I don't want to just talk about me in my video. I mean, I don't just want to talk about me in my videos. I want to know how y'all are too in the comments below. And I know I don't necessarily get to every single comment, but I try and respond to as many comments as I can. So, yeah, leave a comment below. Let me know what's been going on in your life. Oh yeah, and this one's going to be a long one. So grab yourself a drink, grab yourself a snack, grab whatever you need to do to get yourself comfortable. So Ted Bundy. Great start to the video. Ted Bundy was born to a woman named Eleanor Louise Cowell, and she gave birth to him at a house for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont on November 24th, 1946, where he remained for 2 months after his birth. Now, initially, his mother wanted to put him up for adoption, but her father told her, no, don't do that. We want the baby to be part of the family. Don't put him up for adoption. And Louise, his mother, was kind of agreeable. She was like, oh, okay. I really don't want this baby, but I'll keep him just for the sake of keeping the whole family together. So they moved to Philadelphia, and she gave him the name Theodore Cowell. And when Louise and Ted got there, it wasn't exactly what Louise had in mind. I guess she was kind of under the impression that things would be normal when they got there, but very quickly, as soon as they got there, they began to raise Ted to think Louise was his sister. But Ted was smart. And that's something that you're going to see as a common thing throughout this video, is that Ted was a really smart guy. He was an absolute monster, but there's no denying that he was a smart guy. So he kind of knew right away that that wasn't true. I mean, there's a 20-year age difference between Ted and Louise, and of course my brother and I are 13 years apart, but back then that was kind of unheard of. You didn't really hear of parents waiting years and years and years to have multiple children. It's suspected that his father was named Lloyd Marshall, who was an Air Force veteran and a graduate of Penn State. It's also rumored that his father could have been a man named Jack Worthington, and there was one other rumor that I'll address in just a second. Ted's grandmother suffered from agoraphobia, and she was a huge germaphobe. And his grandfather was also very violent, and it's actually thought that Ted was the product of his grandfather assaulting his mother. And even though Ted has said he had a good relationship with his grandfather, it's believed that he had experienced some form of abuse from his grandfather. Whether it was physical or emotional, it's not really known. Side note, as I'm typing this script, I'm watching the 2020 special on Charles Manson, and I keep wanting to type Charles instead of Ted. So people that knew Ted said that he had some weird tendencies. One time when I don't mean to laugh, but it's when you get to the conclusion of this next sentence, you'll understand why I'm laughing. One time when he was a toddler, his aunt found him putting knives near her while she was sleeping, and when she told people about it, they just kind of brushed it off like,
"Yep, that's just Ted. Good old Ted."
When Ted was about 3, he and his mother... Hello, Tinkerbell? Hello? Are you coming over here to say hello? No, she's just investigating my setup. When Ted was about 3, he and his mother left Philadelphia and moved to Tacoma, Washington, and Louise didn't want anyone to know that he was an illegitimate child, so she changed his last name to Nelson, and Ted never really adjusted to the move. He was really unhappy in Tacoma, and he just really missed Philadelphia, and it got even harder whenever Louise met a man named Johnny Bundy, who was a cook in the army for their hospital. Louise and Johnny got married in 1953, and Ted was just pissed about it. He was not happy, and he was going to make that very obvious. There was one instance where Ted purposely threw a temper tantrum at Sears that included wetting his pants, and basically he did this to try to get Johnny to not even bother with him, but it didn't work because he still ended up adopting Ted, and ended up giving Ted his last name, making him Ted Bundy. So the relationship that Ted had with his stepfather was always really kind of tense, and Ted was a very materialistic person, and he was always asking for just really expensive stuff that Johnny just couldn't afford. And because of this, Ted would always just fantasize about someone like Roy Rogers or Dale Evans adopting him because they could afford to buy him the things that he wanted. And like, I kind of get that. Like, whenever I was a kid, I used to want to be a member of the Jetson family because I thought it was just super cool, the house that they had. I even told my mom that my name was Judy after Judy Jetson. There was also a point where I wanted to be adopted by, like, Ray from Sister Sister because they had, like, my dream house, or what I thought was my dream house as a kid. And the sisters from Sister Sister just had these really cool rooms that I wanted to have. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't particularly find this concerning because kids are weird, man. Kids do that kind of stuff all the time. Well, I guess not all the time, but my point is that kids will do weird things and fantasize about weird things, but I don't think it's concerning because even kids who don't end up being murderers fantasize about stuff like this. It's kind of like oh, I wish this were my life. I wonder what my life would be like instead of the life that I have now if I was born into this family. That kind of thing, you know? His relationship with his stepfather never really got better. He would just constantly provoke his stepfather for what he would berate his stepfather for what he perceived as a lack of intelligence, and he would constantly provoke him. And in response, sometimes his stepfather would end up hitting him out of frustration. And he was also upset with his mother for him being illegitimate, but their relationship was a little bit better. She ended up having 4 other children, and Ted said that his mother always made sure that he was loved and was thankful that she kept a roof over their heads. So I guess she kind of 180'd from that whole not wanting to have a child thing. So there's a few different rumors as to how Ted found out that he was illegitimate. It's rumored that he found his birth certificate when he was a teenager and that the space for the father's name was left blank. One of Ted's ex-girlfriends said that when Ted was a preteen that his cousin teased him about not having a dad, And when Ted said, no, look, see, I do have a dad, his cousin showed him the birth certificate with the name left blank. And that's apparently when his resentment for his mother really started. And a friend remembers trying to console Ted, and Ted just getting really angry and saying things like, well, it's not you that's a bastard. So something that Ted was known for as an adult, and after he started his spree, was being really charming, but as a child, he wasn't like that at all. He was teased for having a speech impediment, and he wasn't really athletic or anything like that. Like, he wasn't a bad athlete, but he wasn't ever good enough to be on any teams, and Ted saw this as a massive failure. He was also really awkward around girls and didn't really date, which is the opposite of him as an adult. Also, he wasn't a super good student. He made good enough grades, but he wasn't, like, on the honor roll or anything like that. Oddly enough, though, Ted also did normal things in his childhood. He had a few good friends and took the jobs like delivering newspapers and cutting lawns, like any teenager or child would do back in those days. He also went to church with his family and became the Methodist Youth Fellowship's vice president, and also saved the life of a friend's niece when she was at the risk of drowning, which it's like, okay, well, how'd you go from that to this monster? One of the boys he did scouts with also remembered Ted hitting him on the back of the head with a stick, and how Ted would just dig these holes in the ground. It's not funny. He would dig these holes in the ground and put stakes in them and cover them with leaves like a damn Looney Tunes trap. Yeah, it's horrifying. Except it's not a Looney Tunes trap, and one girl did end up getting hurt. He was also really into stories that were gory and had these graphic depictions of sexual assault and murder, and he also began looking at his grandfather's collection of porn before he moved away from Philadelphia. And he was caught on a few occasions relieving himself in closets at his junior high, and then his classmates, whenever they found him, would just spray him with water, like he was a cat. It was a little bit later that Ted began to commit crimes. He would steal things like ski equipment and forge ski lift tickets so he could get the rides for free. And at one point he tried to steal a car as a teenager, and the cops were just kind of like, yeah, okay, don't do it again. He would also peep on strangers, and it's actually suspected that his killings began way before he was ever caught. When Ted was 14, an 8-year-old girl named Anne Marie Bird disappeared out of her home on August 31st. I can't make the Colin Firth joke again. I've already made that joke. On August 31st, 1961, and at the time, Ted only lived a few miles away from where Anne Marie lived. At the crime scene, they found an open window, an unlocked door, and a footprint. And the only people home that night were Anne Marie's mother and sister. And one big factor for people thinking that he was responsible for this disappearance is because of how close they lived. And some of Ted's confirmed victims were taken when others were nearby. Anne Marie's mother felt that it was likely that her daughter had known her abductor, and Bundy may have met Anne Marie on his paper route or while visiting an uncle who lived in the neighborhood. Now, of course, Ted denied that he had any responsibility for this, and up until his dying day, he said he had nothing to do with it, even when Anne Marie's mother wrote to him to ask him for closure before his execution, so obviously they've never found this poor child. Ted also hinted that there were more victims that he was linked to, but he didn't want to admit to any crimes he could have committed while living with his family. It's important to note that up until a few years after he was accused, his mother stood by his side and said, no, there's no way that my son did this. He did not do this. You have the wrong person. And it actually took him confessing for her to finally admit that he did it. Alright, so let's jump ahead for a moment. Ted graduated from University of Washington with a degree in psychology in 1972, and while he got accepted into law school in Utah, he never actually graduated. Do y'all mind? I'm trying to do a story on Ted Bundy. Do y'all mind? Can y'all take this elsewhere? As he was attending school, he met this beautiful woman named Diane, who was just his dream woman. She was pretty, she was rich, she was a classy girl, and she had influence. He kind of based all of his victims on this woman, and Ted said he felt like Diane was just out of his league. It's suspected that Diane was the first woman that Ted was ever intimate with, and he was kind of more into her than she was him. So during one of the holiday breaks from school, she went home, and while she was away from Ted, she just started feeling like there was no future to be had with Ted. He didn't really have any drive and had no career goals. Diane also realized that Ted was just the type of person to use people. He would get close to people just because of what they could offer him. So Diane breaks things off with Ted, and Ted was not happy with that. He re-enrolled in school because of this, and he wanted to become the man that Diane was looking for. He thought, I'm gonna, straighten up my act, I'm gonna re-enroll in school, and I'm going to become the man that she wants. No, but he did re-enroll in school, and he did want to become the man that she was looking for, and he got a job working on a campaign for Republican Governor Dan Evans, and he just kind of surrounded himself with influential people. And while he was there, he met a woman named Elizabeth Klopfer, who was a young single mother. Now here's what's wild. He at one point worked at a crisis hotline, talking people out of suicide and listening when they had other problems. Once he graduated from school, he reconnected with Diane, even though he was in a relationship with this Elizabeth woman, or Liz for short. At this point, Ted was the man that Diane wanted to be in a relationship with, and they even started talking about getting married. Ted introduced himself as her fiance to his boss, Dan Evans, all while he is dating this other woman. But here's the thing. Ted never actually wanted to be in a relationship with Diane after she broke up with him. So about a month goes by, and he just kind of ghosted Diane. And Diane was like, hey, what's going on? We're engaged. Why are you being so silent? And Ted tells her, I have no idea what you mean. And never spoke to her again. When asked why he did this, Ted said he just wanted to prove to himself that he could marry her. Which, okay, weirdo. The year that Ted broke up with Diane is the same year that he started to become a serial killer. That sounds weird. Started to become a serial killer. I mentioned earlier that all of Ted's victims really resembled Diane. Long, straight hair parted down the middle, young and bright features. His MO did change when he went to Florida after his second escape from prison, but it's suspected that he only changed up his MO to throw off the police. Which, yes, second escape from prison. You heard that right. We're going to talk about that later in the video. Diane, after everything came out about Ted Bundy, was super under the radar. She really didn't want to be known as the woman that almost married Ted Bundy, but she did do an interview to Dr. Al Carlisle, who studied Ted after his conviction and also wrote a book about it. In her conversation with Dr. Carlisle, Diane was pretty frank in dismantling the cool, confident, charismatic act that Bundy pulled off later in his life. She characterized him as weak and a real people pleaser. When they would have arguments, she said that he was pitifully weak and kowtowed to her. She said, and I quote, "This was my main criticism of him after the year and a half of our relationship. He wasn't strong. He wasn't real masculine. If I got mad at him because he did something, he sort of felt apologetic about it. He wouldn't stand up for himself." So Ted confessed to killing at least 36 women across several different states in the 1970s, but it was probably closer to 100. Oftentimes he would... I don't think I can say this word because I think YouTube will, push me down in the algorithm if I say this word. Oftentimes he would do things with his victims before beating them to death. He also would keep their severed heads in his apartments and do things with their corpses. And I want to make it clear that I'm not using these words because I don't have respect for the victims. It's not like that at all. I just don't want YouTube to suppress me because I think that this is an important video. This man was a monster, and I keep seeing women talk about how attractive Ted Bundy is, and I'm just going to say this right now. No serial killer is attractive to me on the sole grounds that they are a serial killer and they have done horrible things. I don't find Jeffrey Dahmer attractive. I don't find Ted Bundy attractive. I don't find any of them attractive. Especially not attractive enough to act up how some of these women act up for Ted Bundy. It's believed that he started his killings around 1974 because this is the time that several women from Seattle and Oregon went missing at that time. Stories also circulated around the time of the victims being seen with a dark-haired man named Ted before they went missing. We all know this part of the story. He'd lure his victims by pretending to be injured and asking for help to his car. Now, I can't go into detail of every single victim because we'd be here forever. But I do want to name them because I think it's important to remember their names. I don't want them to get forgotten in the midst of all of this. I'm only going to be naming victims that did not survive their encounter with Ted, and I'll leave a link in the description to a list of his victims that also includes people that survived or are missing, if I can find the link again. I also will not be going into detail about how he killed them because it's usually the same way every single time, and I also don't want to get too much into the gory details more than I already am. There is a well-known victim that survived named Carol DeRanche. Ted introduced himself as a police officer and told her that her car was broken into and asked her to go to the station with him. Carol thought that was weird, especially once he handcuffed her, so she fought him off and escaped. The victims were Linda Healy, age 21, Donna Manson, age 19, Susan Rancourt, age 18, Roberta Parks, age 20, Brenda Ball, age 22, Denise Naslund, age 18, Janice Ott, age 23, Melissa Smith, age 17, Deborah Kent, age 17, Karen Campbell, age 23, Julie Cunningham, age 26, Melanie Cooley, age 18, Margaret Bowman, age 21, Lisa Levy, age 20, Kimberly Leach, age 12, and that's the one that gets me the most. In the fall of 1974, Ted moved to Utah to attend law school, and women began disappearing there as well. The following year, he was pulled over by the police, and a search of his vehicle uncovered a plethora of burglary tools: a crowbar, a face mask, rope, and handcuffs. And he was arrested for possession of these tools, and the police began to link him to much more sinister crimes. In 1975, remember Carol? The one that escaped? He was arrested for the attempted kidnapping of her, and he received a 1 to 15 year sentence. Ted escaped from prison twice in 1977, which it's like, what are y'all doing if y'all aren't monitoring him? Y'all know that he's a dangerous man. Why are y'all not monitoring this man? Why are y'all giving him the opportunity to escape? The first time, he was indicted on murder charges for the death of a young Colorado woman and decided to act as his own lawyer in the case. During a trip to the courthouse library, he jumped out of a window and made his first escape. He was captured 8 days later. In December, Bundy escaped from custody again. In very Shawshank style, he climbed out of a hole he made in the ceiling of his cell after he dropped more than 30 pounds to fit through the small opening. This man literally dug a hole in his cell ceiling, like in Shawshank Redemption, after he dropped 30 pounds to fit through the hole. Didn't anyone notice that? I thought that plot point in Shawshank Redemption where no one notices the hole in the wall was like kind of ridiculous, because don't they like check prison cells? How would no one notice? But like, apparently not. Oh yeah, and authorities did not discover that Ted was missing for 15 hours, giving him a huge head start on the police. I also want to make a note that he was in jail in Aspen, Colorado, and at one point he filed a motion with the judge for a change of venue, even though his lawyer advised him that Aspen was one of the most liberal towns in Colorado, and he was likely to get a lighter sentence there. and the judge agreed and let him move to Colorado Springs, one of the most conservative towns in Colorado. Now, this was before his escape attempt also, so, like, you screwed yourself, Ted. After Ted's second escape from prison, he eventually made his way to Tallahassee, Florida. He had about $700 with him, and he rented a room from a rooming house called the Oak, which was, like, affordable housing, affordable lodging for college students. I guess it's kind of like a hostel, and he checked in under the name Chris Hagen. On the night of January 14th, 1978, Ted broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. He attacked 4 of the young female residents, killing 2 of them. On February 9th, Ted kidnapped and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Thankfully, this was the last of his spree, because he was pulled over that February, and he had a fake ID on him, so it actually took police quite a while to realize that they had Ted Bundy. Now, here's where things get to be like, Ted, really? He left a bite mark on the victims, like, they were pretty easily able to match that to Ted. And Ted also said that he had no remorse for what he did, and that he felt sorry for people who felt guilt. Which is a common trait in psychopaths and sociopaths. They don't feel remorse for what they did. So, like, at first, when I initially typed this script, I was kind of, like, surprised. Like, wow, what a monster. You don't feel guilt. But the thing about psychopaths and sociopaths is that they don't feel guilt or remorse. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I don't want this video to demonize psychopaths and sociopaths, because there are high-functioning psychopaths and sociopaths that do plenty of good in the world, that are things like doctors and brain surgeons. Ted Bundy is not one of them. So when I mentioned women finding this man attractive, that became a huge focal point in the trial. He was about 6 feet tall, had wavy brown hair, and was what was described as penetrating eyes, and women just loved this man for some reason. I don't care how attractive someone might be, if they're Ted Bundy, I'm not going to be swooning over them. This trial was a mess, y'all. It was a televised trial, and Ted represented himself, and of course everyone knows how poorly he did. Like, he did a terrible job at representing himself. But to be fair, the prosecution had a ton of evidence against him, so it's generally believed that even if he did a good job, he wouldn't have been able to win. Nita Neary was a witness who had actually been coming back from a date to the sorority house that Ted had broken into, that placed him at the scene, because she had actually seen Ted running out of the sorority house. They had forensic evidence, the biggest piece of evidence being those teeth marks, which were easily identifiable as Ted. And y'all, I don't know if y'all have seen that TikTok, but I saw this TikTok where this girl took those, like, a picture of those teeth marks, and, it was this tattoo artist telling this story in this TikTok, and this girl, she brought in, like, teeth marks, like a picture of teeth marks, and the tattoo artist had no idea whose they were, and he thought it was, like, a Twilight thing, like, maybe, like, a vampire thing. And she wanted these teeth marks tattooed on her body. And he was like, oh, whose is it? And she's like, it's Ted Bundy's teeth mark. And he was like, absolutely not. Get out of my studio.
So this lovely young woman comes in to me and she's like, I want to get these teeth done. And she shows me a picture of, like, real life teeth. First of all, I was probably like, okay, what is the vision here? Do you know what I mean? It was a picture of teeth. I was like, okay, what else? And she's like, I want to get these bite marks done. I was like, oh, it's from Twilight or something. Is this like a Team Edward versus Team Jacob kind of thing? Like, what's the vibe? It's like, obviously from Twilight. Because my fucking naive brain was like, oh, it's Twilight. She goes, no, I'd rather not say. It's kind of like a sensitive subject. And I was like, okay, do you mind if I know? Because I am putting my title on this tattoo. She's like, okay, I'll tell you. It's the bite marks of Ted Bundy. No! Straight up no! I was like, first of all, you're a woman. Why would you want this? And then I was like, is this his teeth as well? The crime scene photo she showed me. I was like, is this his teeth? And she was like, yeah, I'm just really interested in serial. Like, I kind of look up to him and so. I was like, first of all, don't say that. Again, you're a woman. He did heinous crimes to poor women. So I said no. It's like, but he's kind of like my idol. I was like, why? What is this man being put on a pedestal for? I was like, have you lost your fucking bananas? I was like, oh my God. So I was like, no. So I straight up said no. I was like, you're going to have to leave. I'm not doing this. I feel really uncomfortable doing this. So a couple of months went by. I'm really bad with faces, by the way. Keep this in mind. A couple of months go by. Okay. She comes back in and it's like, oh, I want to get a portrait done. Again, me being me, don't remember who she is because I was just more horrified at the fact that she had shown me a crime scene photo of Ted Bundy's teeth. And I was like, okay, what portrait do you want to get done? She goes, oh, I want to get this picture of my grandfather. Pulls up a picture. Who's it? Ted Bundy. And I was like, you little, I know who you are. I remember you. I was like, you're not getting the stunt base. Stop chancing your look. She's like, oh, I just wanted to chance my arm. Haha. But look at this. She pulls back her hair, does this, like pulls her hair back. What is there? The bite marks of the tattoo of Ted Bundy on her neck. And the teeth. I go, what? And then she's like, oh, look at this. She has a tattoo like this and it's a hand. And I was like, what's that represent? And she's like, that's the leg size apparently of Ted Bundy's penis. People are fucking sick in the head. Why would you get it? Like, no! Look, I was actually horrified. Get out!
Women still go wild for Ted Bundy and it doesn't make any I don't get it. In July of 1979, Ted was found guilty of the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, as well as the assaults of the other women. He received a total of 270 years for the assaults and received death for the murders, which was to be carried out by electric chair. He was granted several stays of execution, but finally on January 25th, 1989, he was executed. The father of 12-year-old Kimberly saw Ted being transported in a police car, and he said he recalls just wanting to ram into the police car and just kill Ted on his own, which, understandable, I don't blame him. Now, before I leave off, I want to talk about Elizabeth Klopfer, I think her name now is Elizabeth Kendall. She wrote a book. It's called The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy. And yeah, she wrote a book about it, and I highly recommend it. I own it. I got it on sale. But this is what it looks like. I highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal read. The people who picked up Carol DeRanche testified. It says right here. I'm just going to read you an excerpt from it. Next, the older couple who had picked up DeRanche testified. The woman said that when DeRanche appeared in their headlights with the handcuffs dangling from her wrist, she turned to lock her car door. That chilled me. It was like dreams I've had where I try to dial the police and the phone won't work, or I try to run away but the ground has turned into a treadmill. Fortunately, DeRanche had got the car door open before the woman was able to lock it. On Thursday, Ted took the witness stand. He admitted that he had lied to police and to his own attorney about what he had been doing the night he was arrested. He said that his paranoia about getting caught smoking marijuana had made him say that he had been in a nearby drive-in movie and had caused him to take off in his Volkswagen when the patrolman tried to stop him. It's a really good book. I recommend it if you can find it. You can probably find it on Amazon. Barnes & Noble probably has it. Any bookstore probably has it. She was crucial to the story, and I didn't exactly talk about her. So in 1974, she starts questioning Ted about weird things she'd find in the house. Like, she found a meat cleaver in his desk, but anytime she would ask him, he'd just charm her like, oh, it's my writing cleaver. Like, that's not what he said, but I imagine that's how the conversation went. Oh, I don't want to think about anal sex with Ted Bundy. Since Elizabeth wasn't getting any answers, she actually went to the police about it, but the police said they didn't think Ted was the killer. So in 1975, Elizabeth went to the police again, this time with evidence that helped him to arrest Ted, and I couldn't find exactly what that evidence was. But Ted had confessed to Elizabeth over the phone from his prison cell that he had tried to kill her and couldn't resist his impulses when he felt his sickness building up in him, she later wrote. She broke ties with Ted for good and wrote a book about her experience. In February of 1970, Ted married a woman named Carol Ann Boone, a mother of two whom he had dated before his initial arrest, in a courtroom during the penalty phase of his trial. So while this trial is going on, he's getting married. Why not? He proposed, and she accepted in the presence of a judge, making the marriage legitimate in Florida. The couple had met 6 years earlier whenever they had both worked at the Department of Emergency Services in Olympia, Washington, and Carol gave birth to a daughter named Rose in 1982, and she named Ted as the father. Not much is known about Rose today, but I'd kind of want to keep a low profile too if my dad was Ted Bundy. Carol also wrote a book because she originally had believed him to be innocent, and let me see if I can find the name of that book. Oh! Wait a minute. No. Okay, never mind. That's not the same person. Okay, I can't find the name of the book, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But she wrote a book because she originally believed him to be innocent, but eventually she kind of figured out, okay, yeah, this guy's a murderer. And she divorced him 3 years before his execution and stopped visiting during his last 2 years of imprisonment. So like I said, he was executed at around 7 a.m. and outside the prison people actually cheered and set off fireworks after his execution. Ted's body was cremated in Gainesville and no public ceremony was held. Before he was executed, he requested his ashes be scattered in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State, where he murdered at least 4 of his victims. So, one last act as a piece of human garbage before he died. There's been a ton of media made about Ted Bundy. Zac Efron played him in that Netflix movie, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, that had Lily Collins as Elizabeth. And the Ted Bundy tapes is another one. Like I said, Elizabeth's book is called The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy. Polly Nelson, who worked Ted's case pro bono, also wrote a book called Defending the Devil, My Story as Ted Bundy's Last Lawyer. Another survivor also wrote a book. And that's pretty much the story of Ted Bundy. From his life all the way down to his death. I didn't talk about that other theory about his dad. I forgot to include that in the script. And now I can't find my source. Oh, wait, yeah, I did. I did talk about that. Okay, yeah, the theory was that his grandfather was his biological father. Okay, listen. If you're one of those people that are attracted to Ted Bundy, I'll give you a piece of advice. Go to any church, and you'll find at least one man that looks identical to Ted Bundy that has probably not committed a ton of murders. He reminds me of one of my old friend's dads, at least in looks. I don't talk to that friend anymore. It's been several years. But come on, y'all. There are so many people in the world that aren't psychopathic murderers. Pick one of them. You don't have to act up for Ted Bundy. He received so many love letters in the mail whenever he was in prison. And women were lining up outside the courtroom just to get a glance at Ted Bundy. Like, women went crazy over this man, and they still do. There's some word for, like, people who are attracted to, like, serial killers, specifically because they're serial killers, so I guess it's that phenomena. But I can't get behind that. We don't get behind that on this channel. Like Bailey Sarian would say, get better idols. And you know what? It's a lot of teenage girls, too, that are, like, in love with Ted Bundy. That's what's really concerning to me. And apparently, according to a Bundy expert named Kevin Sullivan, I'm just reading this from this article from Psychology Today. According to Bundy expert Kevin Sullivan, some girls wish he were alive so they could date him. MTV.com describes a TikTok trend in which girls videotape themselves as his victim and some even pretend to be him? I don't know, man. I could go on and on about how I can't believe that there are people that are this in love with Ted Bundy, but I won't. So, let me know what y'all thought in these comments below, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye! Give me him. Before I go, y'all remember Milo? How little he was? Well, look how big he is now. Stop trying to escape from me! I love you! No. You weren't trying to escape at all, were you? Yes, you were. Where are you going? Where are you going? Stop! Those are are fake flowers. You can't eat them.